Hello everyone, I'm going to do another episode pretty fast, but I just watched a video by a channel which I really respect and I like, and I'll show you the video later, but it sort of inspired me to do an episode about this topic of light, darkness, positive and negative, because there's still a lot of people that struggle with these concepts, and they always use this opposition vs that really is rooted in duality. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but it does sort of lock you in terms of your experiences, and sometimes locks you in this fear and also suffering kind of mode, which is an experience you can have in infinity, and there's nothing wrong with experiencing those. But if you're tired of experiencing those, then you have to sort of think of a way to better understand these concepts and to change your experience. So the original video is a Q&A for the Patreons, and so I really, from Amanda Shertzer, which I really recommend you to listen to, because I feel that when she asks questions, she really doesn't expect any kind of answer, and asks these questions candidly, which is exactly how you should ask questions, because if you already have a preconceived answer, then whatever you're going to get as information is likely going to be tainted by your beliefs. So just kind of a summary to try to grasp this idea of positive versus negative. Let's go back to vibrations. I always hear this too often quoted thing that says everything is a vibration. Okay, fine, everything is a vibration. And what do you do with that? Well, the more practical way you can start to see how this maxim or this quote applies to reality and your experience of positive as negative is that if you imagine everything to be a vibration, and you, for instance, are this vibration. Let's say you're represented, your entire being is represented by this vibration. Your consciousness is locked into thinking it's this vibration and not another. The ego sort of wraps yourself around that vibration. And you happen in your reality to meet this vibration. How do you think the interaction is going to go? Now, if you understand basic physics, you'll understand that if there's only one dimension and those two waves superimpose, what you'll get is a cancellation in every single point, and it reverts back to nothing, zero. So it cancels you out of existence, this wave, if you interact with it in one dimension, 1D. Of course, in 3D it's more complex, and you have waves can interact even though they are of opposite phase, because they never really fully superimpose thanks to the third dimension, thanks to several dimensions added. It's almost impossible to have several waves or waves that superimpose in such a way that you get silence, but you can nevertheless do the experience. For instance, if you have loudspeakers and you play a sound, a certain sound, there is a specific point of intersection between those waves where you will hear near silence, or when the interaction between those waves will cancel themselves out, and then they will continue on. And so that's why acoustics are so important in terms of sound engineers and all that, to make sure that when they set up their speakers and the bands and everything, that they really take care of making sure that there is no point anywhere where the waves interact in such a way that you get silence. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that the whole idea of light versus darkness and especially about polarity, is a big misunderstanding. Because if you think about it, this is just a convention. Is this one positive and this one negative? Or is this one negative and this one positive? If you do maths, for instance, and you reverse every sign in any equation, every positive then becomes a negative and every negative becomes a positive, you get the same answer with just a change of sign. But it's the same answer nevertheless. And our entire physical reality and our entire universe can work perfectly fine if in every single equation you reverse the polarity of everything. Like electrons now are not negative, but they're positive or whatever, and protons are no longer positive, they're negative. And it wouldn't make a difference. It's a convention. So you cannot say that this is positive and this is negative and this is good and this is bad, this is evil and this is good. It is just that, unfortunately, because everything is a vibration and vibrations tend to interact, then from your perspective, if your ego is identified with one of those vibrations, one of those polarities, then the other will automatically be perceived as evil, or at least as not very pleasant. Now, I have done a video some time ago about free will, the importance of free will. But here I'll just explain the basics of polarity and illustrate what happens when, if you had just one dimension and you would superimpose two waves of opposite phase. Here I have two sound files in a program, in a music program. You can see the little wave shapes here. You can see the little wave shapes here and here. And first, they're a mirror image of each other. They are a mirror. And if you play them together and you don't reverse the phase, you can hear the sound. So here I'm there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the polarity in one of the files, which means that every peak is superimposed now with its crest. And when I play, nothing happens, no sound. No, so this is what happens in 1 dimensions. Of course, we are in 3 dimensions, so this does not apply to our reality. What does apply, however, is the way that waves interacted with each other, and this is best illustrated with music and the actual feeling or sensation of meeting someone or something that is disagreeable or where they're suffering. Here, I'll play a few piano note keys and you'll hear that some of the sounds are not very pleasant. And you see here I'm playing 2 notes that if you only play those 2 notes together, it sounds pretty tense and pretty, unpleasant. Now I've just added 2 notes, and now you can hear that they're much less disturbing or much less unpleasant. And so what you've done here is you've provided context, or you've added a certain number of vibrations that completely change the interplay of the entire set of vibrations that interact between each other. And this is the same thing as if, for instance, that you hear a story about someone that cheated on his partner, and you're outraged at that person. You say, wow, that's a horrible person, blah, 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 blah. And then several weeks later, you hear the background story, and then it turns out that they've done it because there was a certain specific reason that you now recognize as legitimate, and it completely changes your perception of the event, or the facts, which are actually just, the facts haven't changed. It's just you've added information, or vibrations, you could even say, to it, and it makes that event resonate with you completely differently. And so by adding a certain number of vibrations to a certain set of existing vibrations, you can completely change the experience you have of those vibrations. Now, and what I've done here is just to show that there's several ways that you can, there are several vibrations that you can add to the same set and make them sound better. There isn't one right way to do this. And this is why it's such freedom. Just like music, there's just so much freedom in how you can arrange notes, how you can arrange vibrations and tunes. And on a piano, you just have 88 keys, and look at how many possibilities we have. Just imagine in our world how many different perspectives or ways you can interpret a single event. It's unfathomable how many ways you can sort of interpret or live through or experience a certain events that are so-called objective as an individual human. But the piano is a great way to sort of picture it. And here I'm just going to play, just random chords just to show you how adding different chords, just completely changes the feel. Minor, major, there's just so many ways, so many interactions. And again, this is the piano, I find, and music is a very good metaphor for trying to understand better this light versus darkness, especially since in many religious texts they say that sound comes before light. It's the Om sound, or Om like this. I don't know exactly how they spell it, depends. The Om sound, the original sort of sound vibration of the universe, and then you get light from that. Light is just a subset of sound or vibrations. Light is one type of vibration, you could even say. I'm not going to go into details about this transition from sound to light. I'll do another video on that, but just to illustrate that even in the 3D, vibrations do interact with each other. Instruments do, for instance, merge and mix, like violins with the basses and all that stuff in an orchestra. Sound, and in exactly the same way, we interact with each other as a bundle of vibrations that we bring with our beliefs, with our history, our past, and everything else. And when we meet somebody else, there is a sort of interaction between those vibrations that happens. You can even say that it's magnetism or electromagnetism that attracts people that are sort of, a match kind of to your vibration. A match is not really a good way of explaining this, but it's just if you think about music again, there are certain chords that are related to each other, and they tend to go in a sequence. Like 1-5-1 is a very popular sequence, a very well-known sequence, a very standard sequence, and it's just about the relationship between those chords. But for us humans to understand how that works, I think a better metaphor is to think about a theater or a play. Now imagine if you are an actor in that play and you have a script and you write on that script a certain number of things which people say are beliefs, but it's more something like along the lines of I'm always betrayed. I'm always betrayed. And you have written that on your script, which is actually a virgin script. There's nothing written on it. But you've written this on your script, always betrayed. But then the universe, because you cannot play this scene on your own, then there's enough, just, it's so well designed that it makes you meet an actor that in its script says something along the lines of there's no problem taking advantage of gullible people. They deserve it. Let's say that that's their belief. That, or something along the lines of survival of the fittest. You know, a kind of more specific way of fittest. A kind of more specific belief. Like this is one of the more specific ways that you can interpret the belief of survival of the fittest. And of course, since you've already put that in your script and that person has put that in their script, the universe will just pair you together because you work well together as a duo, and then Source can sort of sit back here like this is God and watch the play happen, and both actors play their scripts marvelously well because they're a match for each other, because they believe in their scripts and they're really into it. You know, it's the same thing as watching bad actors play on scene. It's pretty lousy, it's pretty boring, and so the universe makes sure that you and your script, you're always paired with people that have that will make sure that you will play in a very convincing way. Let's put it that way. This has gotten me a little bit off track from the original topic, but I think it's a more down-to-earth way to explain how these vibration stuff and beliefs and all of that works at the scale of humans and our own interactions. And so electromagnetism is what you'd call it in terms of vibrations attracting each other. So what you vibrate, if you are a positive, then you'll attract negative, blah, 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 you know, these kind of logics. But to explain it in human terms, it's better to think of this theater and the play metaphor. So what I'm trying to get to is that there is only light. That's the kind of shocking revelation. There's only light, but there is a light with one phase and there is light with another phase. And sometimes when a sort of a positive light meets a negative light, then it can revert back to darkness. That is a sort of a cancellation of two waves, or let's say a dimming of the light, because there's you never go fully into darkness, but it's more of a dimming, just like this interaction here of two sounds creates spots where there is relative silence or near silence. You can also have a very dimming of light and places where there's a little more quote-unquote darkness or less light, or rather less harmonious. This is really a key term here. Harmonious interactions between, let's say, positive light or negative light. So all that we're sort of trying to do here as humans, I would picture it that way, is just like we've sorted the musical scale and sound into 88 nice keys on the keyboard, that whatever you play, they sound pretty harmonious. I mean, you have to really make an effort to play something bad on the piano because it's still in tune. If you remove, I mean, if you sort of start playing around with the piano and put certain notes out of tune, then you cannot play harmonious things at all anymore. On a tuned piano, you can play harmonious tunes and less harmonious tunes, but never fully, completely absurd and destructive ones. And so it's almost as if what we're trying to do here is, let's say that each human is one key on that keyboard, and we're all trying to sort of find our note our note on that keyboard and fine tune it so that when we play together, it's more or less harmonious, and the interactions are more or less positive. The outcome is always more or less positive when we superimpose or when those vibrations interact one with the other. Now, darkness is nothing bad. Darkness is pure potential. And here you'll have to look at my other videos where I explain that light is infinity. Darkness is zero or nothing or void. And from the darkness is created light. And from infinity, darkness is created again, because infinity, if you slice it in half, if you slice infinity in half, you'll see that it is two opposite waveforms superimposed one on top of the other, which cancel each other out. Infinity cancels itself out, reverts back to darkness, and from darkness comes light again. And what we are doing is we are making sure that infinity does not superimpose itself, does not cancel itself out, and can experience part of itself and pretend it's something specific through the ego, through plenty of identification mechanisms, rather than nothing. It's always more interesting to be something than nothing, or it's always better to be something than everything, because when you're everything, it's the same as if you were nothing. And again, I'll have to point you to my other videos for you to understand why everything and nothing is one and the same. But I hope you found this interesting and useful to better understand light versus darkness, and to understand that once you get this mechanism, then what you're doing, and this is why it's all about this work of working on yourself and to tune yourself, is that when you understand that it's the interaction between what you're vibrating and what you're meeting on the outside that creates a more or less harmonious interaction, then you can disregard what the external world is playing, and you, from your little personal individual perspective, can just tune into whatever you meet. And if you're in tune, then whatever comes out of it is a harmonious interaction. So let's just say that you go to, there are three people here, and it's a band. Three people are playing, and one has its instrument tuned at 432, one at 440, and one at 420. Okay? And, well, they're each fighting over which one is right, which one has the correct tuning. But then one of them realizes that, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to let this go. I'm just going to be a match to whatever I'm playing and whoever I'm playing with. And I'm not attached to a specific tuning reference. I'll just match whatever I'm seeing or whoever I'm playing with. And guess what? That means it's going to be harmonious, regardless of what you meet on the outside. Now, does this mean that you just have to say yes, 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 and never oppose anyone and always be nice and all that? That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the same experience can be done in a harmonious or a disharmonious way, or not. For instance, to give you an example, and this is a very basic example, if you want to experience the fact of killing someone with a gun, you can do it by actually buying a gun and killing someone in the street, or you can just do it in a VR, virtual reality setting. And if you actually let yourself tune in to believing that you're doing that act, you can actually experience that, and all of the thrill and the exhilarating and the rush of adrenaline and all of the stuff that comes with killing someone. you can experience it as play, a game, something that is just entertainment. And it's not that you're still acting, you're still as an actor in this big theater of the universe. Your acting is still perfectly calibrated, and you're still playing your act as if you were really killing someone. But and you're feeling all of the emotions that come with it, everything. But at the outset, there isn't a negative experience. There isn't a negative outcome. And you could say this for everything. I'm not going to go into all of the controversial details, but for every action that you experience in a negative way in reality, there is a way to experience it in a positive way without the suffering. One example that one clairvoyant gave me is, for instance, imagine that your soul wants to experience friendship during your lifetime. Well, it can actually experience it as you having no friends at all, so that your soul learns what it's like, what the benefit of friendship is by loneliness, by experiencing loneliness. Or you can have plenty of friends. In both cases, you've experienced friendship, either through experiencing loneliness and understanding via loneliness the usefulness of having friends, and so the importance of friendship, or by having plenty of friends and still experiencing the importance of friendship. It's just that one is more quote-unquote positive from the human perspective, and one is quote-unquote more negative from the human perspective. But from your soul's perspective, the job is done. Your experience, you've cleared your experience. I hope you find this useful, and don't hesitate to ask any questions.